Hello and welcome to Modern Skills in English. Today we're going to talk about a moment that everyone experiences, but very few of us are ever taught how to handle: receiving criticism. It could be feedback on a school project, a comment from a manager, or even a grade on an essay. It's that moment when someone points out what's wrong with your work.
Just hearing you say that makes my stomach drop. My mind immediately goes to my last presentation. I thought it went well, and then my professor said, "Can I give you some feedback?" I just froze. My brain started racing. I was thinking of all the reasons my slides were good, why I made certain choices. It felt like I was being told I wasn't smart enough. And I haven't even heard the feedback yet. Why does it feel so personal every single time?
That's a powerful question. Most students feel exactly the same way. We treat criticism like a verdict on our abilities. But what if that feeling of defensiveness isn't the real problem? What if it's just a symptom of looking at the conversation from the wrong starting point?
The wrong starting point? What do you mean? The starting point is that they found a mistake in my work.
That's how it feels. But most students believe that when they receive criticism, their job is to defend their work, to explain their choices and prove that they are intelligent and capable.
Yes, exactly. I want them to know I thought about it, that I didn't just do a bad job because I was lazy. It feels important to justify the work.
It does feel important. It feels like we are protecting ourselves. But what if that instinct to protect ourselves is the very thing that stops us from learning? The real problem isn't the criticism. The problem is that we think the goal is to be right.
Wait, if the goal isn't to be right, what is it?
To be effective, to get better. The conversation isn't about your value as a person, it's about the work's potential. And the moment we see that, everything changes.
I want to believe that, but it's hard. When my teacher points out 3 spelling mistakes and a weak argument in my essay, it doesn't feel like a conversation about potential. It feels like a list of my failures.
I understand. Let's break that feeling down. The first and most common belief students have is that the feedback is about them. They hear, "This paragraph is confusing," and they translate it to, "You are a confusing writer," which then becomes, "You are not a good student."
That is exactly the translation my brain does. It's automatic.
It is. Our work feels like a part of us, so an attack on the work feels like an attack on our identity. But this translation is where we lose control. Because when we feel personally attacked, we become defensive. We stop listening for useful information and we start listening for threats. We miss the most important clues for improvement.
So what's the new way to think? How do I stop that automatic translation?
You have to consciously practice a new mental habit. You need to learn how to detach the feedback from your identity. The feedback is just data. It is data about the work, not a judgment on you. Imagine a scientist looking at an experiment that failed. The scientist doesn't think, "I am a failure." They think, "The experiment failed. Why? What data can I collect from this failure to make the next one succeed?" You are the scientist, and your essay is the experiment.
So when my professor says, "This argument is weak," I shouldn't hear, "You are a weak thinker." I should hear, what?
You should hear, "The experiment of this argument did not produce the expected result. The expected result is convincing the reader. This data shows that it didn't. So now, as a scientist, your next question is, why?"
Okay, that feels different, less emotional. The scientist idea helps. It makes it about the project, not about me. So that's the first step, to detach. But what comes next? My instinct is still to jump in and explain why I wrote the argument that way.
And that leads us to the second turning point, the belief that you need to explain yourself. Why do you think we feel such a strong urge to do that?
Because I want them to understand my thinking. If they see my logic, maybe they'll realize it wasn't a weak argument after all. Maybe they just misunderstood me.
That is a very common hope. We want to prove our logic was sound. But what does explaining often sound like to the person giving the feedback?
I guess it can sound like I'm making excuses, like I'm not open to their idea.
Exactly. It can subtly shut the conversation down. The person who is trying to help you might stop because they feel you are arguing instead of listening. The flow of useful information stops. The new way of thinking is this. Instead of defending, you need to start digging.
Digging?
Yes. Become a detective. Your goal is not to prove you are right. Your goal is to find the truth. And the truth you need is hidden inside the other person's mind. So you don't give them more information. You ask for it. You need to probe for more details.
So instead of saying, "Well, I wrote it that way because the book said," what would I say?
You could ask a question. Something like, "That's an interesting point. Could you tell me more about which part of the argument felt weak to you?" Or when you read that section, what was the main question you were left with?
Oh, I see. Those questions don't challenge the feedback. They ask for more of it. It feels less like a fight and more like an investigation.
Precisely. You are shifting from defendant to detective. A defendant just wants to be found innocent. A detective wants to understand the whole story. When you ask those questions, you are not only getting more valuable information, you are also showing the other person that you are confident, curious, and open to improving. It makes them want to help you more.
That makes a lot of sense. But what if the feedback is really vague? That's the worst. Someone just says, I don't know, I just didn't like it. Or a professor writes, needs more work on your paper. That leaves me feeling completely lost.
This is the third and maybe most important turning point. Many students believe that if feedback is vague, it's useless. They feel frustrated and powerless, so they either guess what the person wants or they do nothing at all.
Yes, I've done both. And guessing is dangerous because you can spend hours fixing something and then they say that's not what they meant at all.
Exactly. This is where many people fail. They believe it is the other person's job to give clear feedback. But the new way to think is that it is your job to get clear feedback. You have to guide them.
How can I guide my professor? They're the expert.
Even experts sometimes struggle to put their feelings into words. Your job is to help them. You need to help them articulate what they are thinking. You can offer them choices. For example, if your boss says, this report is just not hitting the mark, you don't have to guess. You can ask clarifying questions.
Like what?
You could say, I want to make sure I understand. When you say it's not hitting the mark, are you thinking more about the data I used, the structure of the report, or the tone of the writing?
Wow. That question gives them 3 options to choose from. It makes it easier for them to identify the real problem.
It does. You are making it easy for them to give you valuable feedback. You take a vague feeling and you help turn it into a concrete action plan. If they say, I think it's the structure, you now have a much smaller, more specific problem to solve. You've gone from, this is bad, to, I need to reorganize these sections. That's a huge difference.
This all sounds good, Sarah. A really logical system. But what if the feedback is just wrong? Or what if it's delivered badly, in an angry or unfair way? Sometimes people are just being critical to be mean. It feels impossible not to get defensive then.
That's a critical question mark. And you're right. Sometimes feedback is delivered poorly. Sometimes it is even unfair. But this system is not about blindly accepting everything you are told. This system is a shield. It protects you.
How does it protect me? It sounds like I'm just taking it.
You're not just taking it. You are managing it. Think about it. Even if someone is angry or unclear, your process remains the same. First, you detach emotionally. You tell yourself, their anger is about them. I am going to look for the data. Their emotion is not your responsibility.
Okay, that's hard, but I see the logic.
Second, you probe. Even if their feedback feels wrong, you ask questions to fully understand it. You might ask, can you help me see it from your perspective? What specifically led you to that conclusion? This can sometimes make the person realize their own feedback isn't well formed.
So by asking questions, I might help them see the flaw in their own logic without ever having to say, you're wrong.
Exactly. And third, you help them articulate. If they are being vague and critical, you can try to guide them to specifics. When you do these 3 things, detach, probe, and articulate, you stay in control of the conversation and, more importantly, in control of yourself. You become a very resilient person. A resilient person isn't someone who never gets criticized. They are someone who can hear it, process it, and use it without breaking. You don't have to agree with the feedback in the end, but you must understand it first. Once you fully understand it, you can decide. You can say, thank you, I understand your point. I will consider that. And then you can choose whether to use it or not.
So the goal isn't to agree, it's just to understand. That changes the pressure completely. I don't have to confront them and start a big argument. I can just investigate. So the whole system is like a filter. It takes the messy, emotional, sometimes unhelpful thing that is criticism, and it helps me turn it into something clean and useful.
That's a perfect way to describe it. You become an active filter, not a passive target. It's like, when I get feedback, my first step is to detach my feelings, see it as data about the project. Then my second step is to probe, ask questions to understand exactly where they are coming from, instead of just defending myself. And the third step?
And the third step is to help them articulate their thoughts if they are being vague. Give them options, help them find the specific words. It makes me feel more in control of the conversation, and a lot more resilient, actually. It feels like a skill I can build.
It is a skill, and it's one of the most important skills for anyone who wants to grow quickly. The people who improve the fastest are not the ones who make the fewest mistakes. They are the ones who are best at using feedback to learn from their mistakes. They don't have to confront every person who gives them criticism. They have a system to process it.
It's strange. I always thought being strong meant being so good that you never got criticism, Or if you did, you could easily prove it was wrong. But it sounds like being strong is actually about how you receive it. It's not about having a perfect first draft. It's about being able to build a better second one.
That's a beautiful way to put it. The goal isn't to avoid the storm, it's to learn how to use the wind. And to everyone listening, thank you for joining us on that journey.
Yeah, this was a big one for me. If there's another tricky student situation you struggle with, maybe let us know in the comments. I'd be curious to see what it is.